details. So finding those important details in a nonfiction text. Good morning, boys and girls. It's Miss Mac here. Let's begin our distance learning lesson for this week by reviewing our Science Week at a glance for Monday, May 4th through Friday, May 8th. Okay, so on Monday, you're going to please watch Miss Mac's YouTube video for This Week in Full, Chapter 1, Lesson 3, Food Webs. And then at the end, you're going to complete the answering questions about a diagram of a kelp forest food web. Tuesday, I want you to come back onto the YouTube page, reread Chapter 1, Lesson 3. So remember, pause, read, record your responses. We're going to do this so that we can check our understanding of the content in which we read. So you're going to answer the quick checks found in Lesson 3. You're going to bring your answers to the diagram and your quick check responses to numbers 23 through 27 to our Zoom meeting on Wednesday. Wednesday, whole group Zoom session begins at 11 a.m. Bring answers to questions about a diagram and your quick check responses independently. After Zoom is over, I want you guys to sign on to your RAS Kids, enter your reading room or your level up room, practice, read, listen, and complete the 5-question quizzes. Thursday and Friday, same thing, RAS Kids, reading room or level up practice, read, listen, and complete 5-question quiz. Okay, so that's our week at a glance. Now, I want to look back at last week and review. So last week we did summarizing informational nonfiction. The main focus that we worked on last week was reading the content and pulling out those meaningful wow words that were repeated throughout the passage or the text, right? So just to recap, when we summarize informational nonfiction, we choose only the most important information that helps us remember what we've read. So some bullet points here are: read the entire text. You have to read the entire text. Describe the central or the main ideas, identify the key supporting details, and avoid opinions and unimportant details. Okay, so this is just recapping our summarizing informational nonfiction. Now, I know this week Ms. Mosel did summarizing nonfiction as well and focused on the detail. So another important piece of information found within our nonfiction text that the author includes are text features. I want you to read or follow along as I read aloud Lesson 3. And as I'm reading, I want you to think about what is the central idea and the details that support it. And then I also want you to think about in what other ways or in what other way is the author providing us information. So what do you see as I'm reading? Okay. All right, so here we go. Lesson 3, food webs. What is a food web? Many food chains are going on at the same time in any place. Follow the arrows in the picture. You'll find many food chains. The picture shows a food web. A food web shows how food chains are linked together in an environment. Food chains are linked when any one animal belongs to more than one food chain. For example, the mouse belongs to 2 food chains. So the plant, the mouse, the snake eats the mouse eats the plant. The coyote eats the mouse eats the plant. So there's 2 different food chains. Remember I said take notice of the other features the author includes. Food chains show how different living things compete. When living things compete, they try to get the same thing, such as food. For example, both snakes and coyotes eat mice. Both mice and rabbits eat grass. How can food webs change? Look at the kelp forest food web. Try to find as many food chains as you can. Start with the kelp in the lower left corner. Kelp is a kind of seaweed. Kelp grows in underwater forests. Many kinds of living things eat the kelp. For example, here are just three food chains. They all start with kelp. Sea otters eat the urchins eats the kelp. Sea otters eat crabs, crabs eat sea cucumbers eat kelp. Sea otters eat crabs, crabs eat mussels, and the mussels eat the kelp. Three separate food chains. Okay. A change in one kind of living thing in a food web causes other kinds of living things to change. For example, over 200 years ago, sea otters were hunted for their fur, so there were fewer and fewer sea otters in the food web. Look at the kelp forest food web. Sea otters eat sea urchins. Without sea otters, fewer sea urchins were being eaten. So you have your sea otters, eat your sea urchins, eat your kelp. Soon there were too many sea urchins in the kelp forest. They were eating up the kelp. Other living things, such as mussels, could not get the kelp they needed. The mussels began to die out. Then crabs, which eat mussels, began to die out as well. So, how do new organisms change food webs? A food web can change when a living thing is added to a place. For example, in Australia, over 70 years ago, insects were eating sugarcane plants. Farmers brought in large toads to eat the insects and save the sugarcane. The farmers hoped that lizards and birds would eat some of the toads. They wanted to keep the number of toads from growing. However, the toads did not eat the insects. They ate the birds and lizards instead. The toads grew in number. They ate just about everything they could, even pets. What's more, the insects kept eating the sugar cane. So, how does energy flow in a food web? This diagram is a summary of what happens to the energy in a food web. The bottom of the diagram shows a producer, grass. Remember, producers get energy from the sun. Producers make up the biggest part of the diagram. The other levels are all consumers. Energy is passed to each level on top when the animal eats the food below it. The levels get smaller as you go to the top. Many producers are needed for the energy of just one living thing at the top. Okay, so that's the end of chapter 1, lesson 3, the, the text, the passage. So remember, I had asked you to think about what the central ideas and the details that support it were. And the main focus for this week's lesson is this part right here. In what other ways or way is the author providing us information and what do you see? So when I was reading, I noticed a lot of diagrams. We have this triangle or pyramid shaped diagram here titled Energy Summary. Each level of the diagram shows a producer or consumer in a food web. And I see lots and lots of additional features here, but in this lesson, there were so many diagrams. And this is a picture with a nice caption here. But we have the pyramid diagram, and then up here again, we have the kelp forest food web diagram, the arrows. And then up here at the bottom of pages 15 and 14, remember the text really should be side to side, but it's going from top to bottom, so it doesn't match correctly. But if you take a peek here, go back up real quick and look at the start here, you have an example of a food web diagram, and it's showing all the different chains, it appears, and how those chains form together to create a food web, which was the title of this lesson. All right, so let's move forward and discuss, well, what are these? So these are text features. Now, diagrams are just an example of one text feature, but let's review text features. Text features are visual pieces of text that help organize the information. So they're visual, they're things that we can see, not just words on a page. Text features such as charts, diagrams, and graphs make the text more interesting, and it helps us understand the information on a deeper level by providing numbers and pictures or shapes that help us make sense of the information. So, the one feature that was repeated throughout this lesson was the diagram. So, let's focus on that. A diagram is a drawing or a plan that shows how something has different parts and how the parts work together. So I want you to take a minute to analyze the diagrams on pages 14 through 16 and page 19 in the Food Webs lesson. And how does this feature help us better understand the text? So how do these diagrams help us better understand? So real quick, we're just going to look, and what do we notice about this diagram? So yeah, there's like a bird, and there's leaves and snakes. But what is this all about? Oh, they're the arrows that are showing us the path. So remember, if we reflect on lesson 2 on food chains, we saw the path of energy from the producers to the consumers to the decomposers. So if we look here, we have our producers, the leaves, we have a consumer, our primary consumer, and then as we follow the arrows, this one goes up to here to the hawk. Well, the hawk eats the bird eats the leaves. That's one food chain, right? But then the hawk eats the snake, but a snake eats the mouse. There's the other piece of that arrow there. So even if we didn't know that about the arrows right away, what does this tell us right here? The arrows show the path of energy. For example, energy from a leaf goes to the small bird when the bird eats the leaf. The hawk gets energy when it eats the small bird. Okay, so let's go back. So let's recap what these diagrams showed us. What did they help us better understand in the text? Well, the diagrams helped me understand the path of energy by using arrows to show the flow. The arrows pointed to and away from each living thing to see how it is part of a different food chain. And that in that bottom diagram on page 19, the one that was shaped like a pyramid, that helped me understand that the most powerful consumers are at the top of the food chain. And one of those very powerful consumers is our bald eagle. And another thing the diagram really helped me to understand, those examples of diagrams in there, were how food chains have different parts that work together to create food webs. And this right here, I'm pretty certain that's almost our central idea. So that goes back to our lesson 2, summarizing. Okay. Now that I showed you a couple examples of diagrams, recapped and reviewed what a diagram is, how that text feature helps us understand or better understand the information we're reading, it's your turn. So it's your turn to analyze the kelp forest food web diagram, And I want you to use the diagram to answer questions about the information that the diagram is presenting. And then remember, please remember to bring your work on Wednesday to our Zoom meeting so that we can go over it together. Okay? So I'm going to pull that up for you. So to do this last part, remember to pause the video, analyze the diagram. Here we go. Let me pull it up. Okay. So here is the kelp forest food web. Study the food web below, then answer the question. So analyze this food web right here. Let me move me so we can see it better. All right. So here it is. So pause the video here for a minute or two. Review, analyze each piece of this food web, and then come back, press play, read these 5 questions. So I need you to take a piece of paper, label it 1 to 5, and I need you to write your responses down. So you're going to read number 1, which of the following organisms in the food web make their own food? So go up here, find that information. Answer with either choice A, B, C, or D. Same thing with number 2. Which of the following is an example of one food chain in this diagram? So make sure you're matching it up. Oh my gosh, sorry, there's a giant moth. Flip me out. Okay, so again, check, go back. Does kelp eat the sun? Does the sun eat the crab? Hint, hint, it doesn't. So do that process of elimination. All right, number 3, true or false? Sea urchins get energy by eating kelp. Number 4, which organism directly or indirectly gives energy to the most organisms in the food web? And number 5, describe what might happen to the kelp forest food web if sea otters became extinct. So remember, extinct means they no longer are alive. There are no more sea otters. So what do you think might happen to the kelp food web if you took out that consumer, if that sea otter went missing? Okay, or not went missing, went extinct rather. All right. I will see you guys on Wednesday and have a wonderful Monday. Don't forget to check the schedule for what you are supposed to be doing this week. On Dojo is the schedule for math, science, and ELA. And in the beginning of this video is your schedule for your assignments for science. All right, boys and girls, have a fabulous day and week, and I will see you on Wednesday.